G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube for another late night review of what was a pretty convincing loss to Hawthorn at Marvel Stadium today. I was contemplating whether this should be a tea this late, but then I just thought, fuck it, I've still got a caravan to pack and I do enjoy a cappuccino before I get stuck into things. So on that note, let's look at what we'll be getting stuck into for this review. First up, I'll run through our best players today, then key takeaways from the match, and maybe a little coverage of where I think we'll be headed from here. Just because we're definitely at the phase of a rebuild where, as fans, you're better off looking at where we're headed rather than where we're currently at. That said, there's no knock on how admirably I think we played against just a more established team today. But first, as always, I do need to make my usual humble request to anybody watching this video that isn't already a subscriber to please consider hitting that subscribe button if you're enjoying this content. At the moment, I'm putting this request at the start of my videos because YouTube won't allow any content that I produce in the future to become monetized until there's a minimum of 1,000 subscribers following the channel. So until I get to that point, I do think it's important to emphasize how valuable every new and current subscriber is to this channel and the work that I put into it. Also, as anybody subscribed to the channel will tell you, I do put these videos out on a weekly basis, reviewing both the AFL and Waffle squad. So hopefully there's some valuable insights available to anybody who likes to keep up, especially during this rebuild where so many stars of the future haven't really cemented their spots in the starting 23 of the AFL side. Anyways, now that we've covered that, let's get into our best players today against Hawthorn. To start off my list of best players, I've got to put Jack Hutchinson right at the top today. In the final game of 2024, West Coast swung Hutchinson into the midfield for the second half against Geelong. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that actually remember this because it really stood out to me, and I think not just myself. But it was just an experimental attempt to try and pull something different into the midfield that was getting pulled to pieces at the time. I don't want to exaggerate, but it was very close to like a 100-point deficit at halftime. It was a really bad start to the game. And that one move at the time turned the entire tempo of the game around. And since then, he's pretty much been a walk-in starter to the side, but mainly as a reward for just that relentless intensity and power from start to finish every single week that I keep talking about. But today, we got to see that same Hutchinson again in the midfield against Hawthorn. Admittedly, that midfield just has such a long road ahead before our young talent establishes itself against the best of the competition, just like just about every team is at the moment. So there was just too much missing around Hutchinson for his effort to have that same impact as it did in the second half against Geelong. But what I saw today was a look at one of the guys who should be there when West Coast is back on top. And by there, I mean in the midfield with us. That's what I think he's really started to prove at the moment. Unfortunately, in our bests, there was a pretty big drop-off between what I saw in Jack Hutchinson's performance and the rest of our better performers for the day. So I'm probably going to just list a batch of them now and then give a bit of a rundown on what I thought they did well before I just go straight to the key takeaways from the match. There were decent contributions from Liam Ryan, Liam Baker, Jake Waterman early, and Jaden Hunt looked like he was playing to his strengths again after a few reasonably adequate games this year, especially by his standards in his first couple of years at West Coast. Liam Ryan ended up with 3 goals and just looked back to his explosive best whenever he was around the football, or even chasing, which I think is one of his most underrated traits. I know I went on about it a couple of weeks ago in his game against Carlton, but I think that his chase, especially on long distances, is one of the most impressive chases that we've got in the comp at the moment. I think he got a bit unlucky as well, giving away what would have been a certain goal to Jake Waterman after a pretty ugly tunnelling incident from Jack Scrimshaw using the back of his head. Apparently, the umpire thought that qualified as an unrealistic attempt, which was disappointing. Liam Baker gets my known quantity mention for the day. He did what he does best every week, just doing a heap of heavy lifting in the contest, very slick hands, and as always, he's just a really big playmaker. As I mentioned, Jake Waterman started really strong for the second week in a row. He got both his goals in the first half and really did it with very little supply. I've always been a really big fan of Waterman's, and I actually don't think I'd pick another key forward in the comp ahead of him just to convert the current opportunities that he's getting in that forward line into goals the way that he does. Big fan of Hogan at GWS, but I just wouldn't swap Waterman for anyone at the moment. I think he's as good as they get given the supply that he's getting. Other than that, the list of really strong performers doesn't run too deep. It's probably just worth mentioning how good Ruben Jinby is every week, even though the role he plays doesn't really allow him to get a ton of the footy. But I won't scratch any deeper for individual performances and just get into my key takeaways. My first one is there's actually two ways you can interpret this loss. On one hand, there's no doubt that Hawthorn could have belted us by closer to 100 points if they'd kicked accurately. There's a lot of very easy misses at their end that helped just the scoreboard. But on the other hand, it wouldn't be unfair to say that West Coast didn't drop their heads once at any point all day, which I think to acknowledge that latter angle just requires being honest with where we're at the moment. By comparing, maybe, like in the last couple of years, we've seen rock bottom football from the West Coast Eagles Football Club. And I know that there's journalists out there. I think Damien Barrett likes to comment, and he knows nothing about the game, that, we still haven't seen rock bottom from West Coast. But the truth is, there was a moment in the second quarter today where it looked like things were going to get really ugly. And a couple of years ago, that game would have gotten really ugly, but it didn't. And as far as I know, even last year, I don't think West Coast conceded a single 100-point loss all year. It's not about setting the bar super low. I'm just saying that that's where rock bottom has been, and it was a couple of years ago, in my opinion. The other one, my second takeaway, might be a bit of an elephant in the room that just needs to be clearly addressed. And this week is probably as good as any. That elephant is that West Coast is probably the only club in the competition right now that doesn't have a genuinely qualified senior midfield. On one hand, it's a bit of a knock on us as a club just to find ourselves in the situation that we had. But in another sense, it does make the way that we are competing week in, week out quite admirable in my opinion. And it makes where we're going quite exciting as well, which is actually how I look at football during rebuilds. We haven't had too many, so there's a lot to be excited about if you can sort of ignore the score lines. Hopefully it's not going to be the case every week. But to put what I'm saying under the microscope, let's just put the best midfield that we could possibly assemble under that microscope. It'd probably involve a fully fit Elliot Yeo, an informed Tim Kelly, and then a rotation of Jack Graham and Harley Reid. With Harley Reid probably afforded a little bit less attention than what he gets when he's out there on his own, not surrounded by senior stars, which is probably why he's at halfback at the moment, definitely. From there, I'd imagine building Elijah Hewitt's minutes in the middle, Jack Hutchinson rotating as well while he builds his knowledge and craft would be a great combination. While we all know that Liam Baker can pinch hit at centre bounces as well, just to shake up the opposition at crucial moments. That would be best scenario, which is very hard at the moment with Kelly injured and probably just a little bit below his best, and Elliot Yeo injured on the longer term. And he's a guy who does actually need a decent run up with a preseason to be that elite player that is out there dominating. So what we actually have right now instead, if we're going to keep putting things under the microscope, is Jack Hutchinson doing a ton of heavy lifting in there, alongside Jack Graham, Elijah Hewitt, occasionally Reid, as well as calling on Liam Baker to rescue us for too many minutes each game for a smaller body, which could take a toll on his longevity if we keep throwing that 175 centimetre body into the bottom of packs to win contested football for us every week. And I do think he had a lot less time in the midfield, possibly because we are trying to shift away from that dependency that isn't sustainable. The exciting part, though, now that we've looked at what we could have and where we're at, is where we're going to be as time goes on. After years of pulling no real young midfield talent in from the draft, I mean, if you want to go back far enough, Daniel Venable's career-ending concussion was the last draftee that we had that was really in that calibre or moving in that direction. We've actually picked up recently a whole new generation of promising midfielders over the last 3 years. If you watch my Waffle review earlier this weekend, you'll know that I have a really optimistic outlook on both Clay Hall and Tom Gross. And that's just in the immediate future, while last week Elijah Hewitt showed the entire competition what a damaging midfielder he can be on the back of just a couple of games in a row after years compromised by injury, including this year as well. So over the course of just this year alone, I do expect to see all three of those guys improve massively just from more exposure to AFL or even just senior footy in the waffle. Either way, just continuity without injury. And with most of our senior midfield stars out of our side already injured, it shouldn't be that long before the guys I'm mentioning are able to start imposing themselves on AFL games much more consistently and eventually become the midfield that we currently don't have. I probably can't give you a timeline for that, but what I will say is that with the exposure they're getting, that sink or swim moment that we're all witnessing right now live means it will probably be a much better team even before the end of this year is out, as long as injury doesn't really interrupt that prediction. Also, that's not counting that there are other young mids on our list that could very well put their hands up soon to prove that they're going to make themselves long-term players for us in that part of the ground. I know that Grego's doing really well at Waffle, and he's a first-year player, and we don't want to put the ceiling too high on these guys just because there's, Tom Gross has exploded out and is ready for AFL at the moment. So possibly over the course of future years rather than in coming months, like I'm saying for Hewitt, Cross and Hall, and possibly Bo Allen. Either way, he's definitely going to be a long-term prospect. But hopefully by the end of the year, Yo and Kelly can get themselves back in form by that stage too, take some of the pressure off them while still letting the younger guys get that exposure. So I do know that as far as key takeaways go, that one grew arms and legs, but I did feel like tonight's observation about our midfield would be a really good segue to something that I've been watching all summer quite excitedly. If you guys look back, for anyone who's been following the channel over summer, you'll see that's really where I've been headed with my observations. So I hope everyone watching enjoyed that and would love to hear your feedback on how fast you as fans as well think all the young talent that we have finally drafted will take before they start making us a better team. That's about it for my Hawthorn review. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you all again next Saturday for the review against Melbourne and the weekly Waffle review, which will be played earlier that day on the Saturday. And until then,